Hello, my name is Hannah Lavery and welcome to Quines Cast, Scotland's feminist arts podcast.
And I'm Caitlin Skinner and we are your hosts for this, the third episode in our series, and today's theme is change.
On each episode we invite some of Scotland's leading feminist writers, poets, playwrights and musicians to respond.
Today we are joined by musician Hailey Beavis, novelist and journalist Kirstin Innes, writer Louise Welsh, and we also have a short play written by the brilliant satirist Uma Nada-Rajah.
Quines Cast is brought to you by feminist theatre company Stella Quines in association with the Travis Theatre, Edinburgh International Book Festival and Jupiter Artland.
So Hannah, here we are, episode 3. Are you ready for a change? How do you cope with change in your own life?
Well, I want change. I think I used to be better at coping with change than I probably am as I get older. But I think I would hope to think that I'm always open to at least changing my mind. If changing my routines and other things are a bit harder. But yeah, I'm definitely ready for change. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm amazed again about how challenging I find change, actually, as someone who's always talking about it and fighting for it and wanting it and feeling like there's a need for it. I moved house at the beginning of the year and I'm still recovering. Like, it is a big change. It's a big shift. I don't know if I've coped that well with it. Yeah, so it's harder than you think, right?
Yeah, no, I think definitely what I learned through the pandemic is actually how much I value routine and familiar. And like yourself, I want change for the society that we live in. I want change for the world. But in my own life, yeah, I don't manage it as well as I think I will, or at least I've learned that actually what I like is things that feel quite familiar to me and slow change probably I'm better at managing. Yeah, I feel a bit of a contradiction.
Yeah, well, luckily, Hannah, we have some excellent guests to help you ruminate on this theme.
So we do. We absolutely do. I suppose it is, change is always about leaving something behind, isn't it? And moving to the new. So this episode was recorded at the Travis Theatre in September. In that weird week just after the Queen's funeral, I think, there was definitely reflections upon that. And so to open our show, we welcome some music from the wonderful and one of my favourite human beings, Hailey Beavis.
I'm going to start off the show with a song of my own. I was thinking about change, and I was thinking there's change that we make happen and there's change that sort of happens to you. And this song is, I think, me taking stock of some of the change that's happened.
helpless hand on top of the other. Though there are birds at my shoulder, the rooftops are white, in the sunlight they look black as I grow older. soft and silver, soft and silver, soft and silver.
What a wonderful opening to our episode. And I loved what Hailey said about the change that happens to you and the change that you want to happen. And I feel like that sort of resonates in what we were talking about at the opening of the show, this idea that we want change, but we're also not ready for change. And I wonder if what we're actually articulating is that we're ready for the change we want, but sometimes we struggle with the change that is forced upon us.
Yeah, so our first guest, Kirstin Innes, has written a provocation piece for each episode of Quines Cast. We invite a writer, an author, to write a provocation piece to get us thinking, get us going, get us asking questions. And Kirstin is a super thoughtful, witty and intelligent writer. I feel like she's really taken on and wrestled with that exact thing, those themes about the change you want versus the change that is thrust upon you. So here is Kirstin with her provocation piece.
So I started writing this on the 1st of September. Felt like a good time to address the theme of change. A new season starting. September's a big one for me because at the end of the month I turn, it's my birthday. I'll be 42 at the end of this month. The day started, as it always does, with the school run, the usual coaxing, pleading, shouting and negotiating involved in getting two small boys into their shoes and their bags and out of the door and up Pooh Hill. Pooh Hill is a perilously steep stretch of pedestrian concrete linking two parts of a 1960s council estate. The council no longer bothers with street cleaning in our village, hence the name. Once the mountain is summited and the dog shite dodged, I actually love the school run. I love the comfort of smiling at the same neighbours' faces every morning at the same time. Leslie, Eileen, Mikey, Scott. I love straggling at the gates afterwards, making the same jokes in the playground with the other parents as we wait outside the well-snottered nursery window for the ceremonial farewell wave. Catching Nikki, who's always late, and whoever else she's picked up for a quick gossip outside the primary 2 door. Today's topics: is 6.5 too young for The Lord of the Rings? Just the first one, likes, not the violent one. After-school drama and football classes, and preserving our boy children's creativity and feminine sides within that world. What is the tooth fairy's going rate for a first tooth these days? Because we have a wobbler. Someone in the class got £20. Isn't that obscene? Oh my God, £20. Did she give her £20? Not 20p. Nobody talks about politics, not on the school run in a village in the southwest of Scotland. The person I was 10 years ago, city-dwelling, bar-hopping, culturally and politically active, worried about how her desperate need to be a mother would curtail these things that she felt were essential to her being, would probably be sickened by this. I don't care what she thinks. She is as yet unaware of the endometriosis hiding in her body, on the cusp of unsettling years of medical invasion, investigation, IVF, miscarriage, that will finally make getting here a blessed relief. Each little daily sameness is an affirmation of my place in this community, shored up and glowing from it on the 1st of September, deciding I was going to write this provocation all about me and how I've changed, although I'm not totally sure what's provocative about that. I walked down the hill into the house, put on the kettle, switched on my old laptop and gave it time to wheeze into life. And I somehow found myself sitting on the stairs watching a video on my phone that had been filmed on someone else's phone just a few hours earlier, of a massive force of brown water crushing into a village somewhere in Pakistan. Can you remember back 2 weeks to when the flooding in Pakistan made the news? I mean, life comes at you fast in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland these days, right? Things that are not the movement of a coffin down the country are not news this week. Back in the mists of time, in the Elizabethan age, on the 1st of September, I was rooted to the spot on the stairs. I tried to make sense of the statistics behind the video I'd just seen. 55% of the population of Pakistan had had their homes destroyed in 2 days. Over 1,000 people dead, half of them children. A third of the country underwater. 80% of the country's livestock had been wiped out. And it was due to glacier melt. This was the bit that got me first, a thing I'd never even thought to consider, that Pakistan, with 7,253 glaciers, is home to more glacial ice than anywhere outside of the polar regions. Sorry, was home to. The person who made the film is holding their phone in the same way as I'm holding mine to watch it. There are other people, neighbours, watching the water coming too. And it starts with the noise, like a really loud hoover, maybe, or an old hand dryer in a public toilet. Some of the men react more quickly than others. They shout and run, their bodies spiking with some primal instinct of self-preservation. 3 of them are frozen by the sight of a body of water bigger than the trees crushing itself down upon their houses. I'm trying to find the right word for what this water does. Smash, steamroll. The words aren't quite right because this water is behaving in a way that we don't have words to describe, that water doesn't normally. Anyway, some of the men don't run away until the last minute, shouting at each other to encourage themselves to move. A neighbour screams something at the person holding the camera who stays the longest, the urge to flee only just winning out over the need to pay witness to communicate this. Then the video cuts out. It's all over in 30 seconds. A huge river where 4 small houses and some tall trees were just before. I think this is how it happened. I made notes, but sitting here writing it this morning, I couldn't find the video to refer to, no matter what I Googled. By the time I saw it, the video had already become unstuck from the person who filmed it and the place it depicted, made anonymous enough to stand in for a whole country. There were pages and pages and pages in the search. I know I was moved enough 2 weeks ago when I started writing this to tweet links to the Disaster Emergency Committee's website to donate money to research these numbers. Glacial melt. Then I got stuck in this brief, breathless, anxious bout of egocentric anxiety. I've said anxious twice there. About living on a floodplain between 2 lochs, as I do. A tiny, selfish bit of me reaching for comfort in the knowledge that at least my children's school is up the top of that very steep hill, so at least they would be safe. But then what happened in those 2 weeks? A middle-class white Western woman, already centering herself in someone else's tragedy, stayed frozen on her stairs, gazing at her phone screen for long enough that it presented her with 10, 30, 300 other things to get outraged or worried or outraged and worried about. And she took direct action to change or stop precisely none of them. I remember reading something once somewhere on the internet that said something like, we are not supposed to live with this constant awareness of this many other people's thoughts at once. Our brains aren't built to cope with it. I'm paraphrasing. I have no more way of finding that original sentence and crediting its author than I have of finding out what happened to the person who held the phone to let me and thousands like me see the destruction of their home by the floods. And now today, 2 weeks on, the things that the internet has moved me to worry about again are different. Hospitals closing and essential surgeries being postponed until Monday, the closure of Parliament for 75 out of 80 days during a major cost of living crisis, the protesters arrested on the street I used to work on for being publicly Republican at a time when that has been declared unseemly. Then there's the baseline. How long can a 4-person household where neither adult has steady or reliable income hold off before putting the heating back on? Will we make it to October? That cough that my 4-year-old developed last night, I dropped him off at nursery going, don't worry, it's not COVID. But I'm wondering what will happen if I test him again tomorrow. The leak in the roof that we can't afford to get fixed right now, and actually whether or not has that caused the cough, because he's always had weak lungs. He spent his first night on earth in a glass tank and a drip, and then the drum beat. An ever-present thud going on for at least 7 or 8 years now. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. So I'm sitting on the stairs, not moving, because I've declared myself powerless. How can I, one small skint human half a world away, help the people of Pakistan or stop climate change or protect democracy or generate any sort of difference at all? It doesn't stop me wanting to, and that makes it worse. The me of 10 years ago, this mythical bar-hopping vixen self who didn't feel a constant anxious pull tattooed upon her whenever she was apart from her children, who didn't need to plan every outfit to conceal the wasted muscle-free slop of post-C-section stomach, who had just booked tickets to see Leonard Cohen play in Paris on her 32nd birthday because she had the money to do that, who hasn't spent 2 years on sertraline to treat postnatal depression. She was part of a political movement. She committed herself to one cause that she believed would create a fairer, more equal, greener society. She marched, she demonstrated, she posted leaflets, she organised conversations. I wonder when I stopped being her. I look at pictures of her from 2012 and 13 and 14 on Facebook sometimes. We have the same partner and pretty much the same hair. But almost everything else has changed, most particularly the hope, which got slowly pressed out after every defeat, just as that drum beat got louder. And actually just writing this through, ready to be performed provocatively later this evening, has helped me get it straight. The problem is overwhelm. Whether it's some diabolical political strategy or just that the whole of the internet and everything happening in the world at any one moment are too big for any single human brain to fully comprehend. We're saturated in outrage and it's making us coagulate. If we pause to bear witness to everything, do we perhaps miss our moment to take action and make change? I say we, but I just mean me. I'm not going to presume to speak for any of you. Is there a line to be drawn between bearing witness and worrying myself into stasis? I'm pretty sure that the people taking direct action about climate change, about this country's increasing slide into a police state, about resisting energy bills or organising their co-workers or bringing relief to flood victims in Pakistan are not sitting frozen on their stairs in the screen light. So maybe this is just a provocation to me. This morning, 14th of September, 2 weeks till my birthday, school run again, I coaxed and yelled and negotiated the boys into their shoes and out of the door and up the hill, avoiding the dog shite. Wobbly tooth is still there, hanging by a thread, and I smiled at Leslie and Eileen and Mikey and Scott and blew kisses to my children from their separate classroom windows, and I stopped to check in with Nikki about that emergency root canal she had, and I was not on my phone, and I felt both very rooted in my world and aware of how temporary it was.
I think that was just absolutely wonderful. Her writing always just gets me. And, I was thinking as we sit here in November, still much of Pakistan is underwater and it's still not making the news. And it struck me listening to Kirstin just about how much we distract ourselves from the inevitable change that's coming with the climate crisis. And I don't even know how we as individuals kind of comprehend what that means for us. And I totally understand that paralysis. What was your response to that?
I think the quote that Kirstin's paraphrasing that we're not meant to kind of live with the awareness of this amount of people, other people's situations, or this amount of tragedy that's happening elsewhere. That makes sense to me, right? Because I think our brains aren't really able to cope with that. And it is really easy for us to get overwhelmed. And yeah, on the one hand, you are saying that's awful that the situation in Pakistan is still not making the news in November. And also you're like, well, no wonder, because it's not like my news feed is lacking in tragedy or a sense of reality of the global situation. And I find that quite reassuring. Her provocation there, even if to herself, is about like, how do we not miss our moment to make change? Because we're sitting in that overwhelm that we're worrying ourselves into a state of stasis. And I think that's really important. It's like, okay, how do you find focus? How do you find sense of agency, a sense of purpose, without letting yourself go into that spiral of overwhelm? Because it's so easy to do it.
I do think there's something around the climate crisis where it's so much easier for us because it seems so enormous and we feel so hopeless in the face of it to sort of bury our heads in the sand. And, I think we're getting to the point where that's not possible. But I wonder, and what was beautiful about Kirstin's piece was all of that community and all of that small town community, and that my sense and my instinct is that change that we're going to need to see on a global level is going to have to begin within communities. I was going to say at this point, I'm just really curious to see how our discussion groups responded to this theme. So I wondered if this was the moment to introduce them.
Yeah, it's great. They're kind of like our little community in a way, aren't they? So we have, as well as bringing together contributions from these great artists across Quines Cast every week, you'll hear fragments of conversations from our discussion group. They are an extraordinary group of women. They have a big range of backgrounds and experiences: medicine, art, music, social services, activism. And we bring them together, pop microphones in front of them, and listen to what they've got to say.
So the discussion group are Lisa George, Talat Yaqub, Aman Apul, Clementine Burnley, Carrie Lunan, and B. Asher. And their conversation was beautifully captured by the tremendous editor, Helena Rafai.
If we think of things about inequality and who's locked into inequality, when we're talking about racism, sexism, communities of colour, women are more likely to be also in poverty. Mm-hmm. So for me, the biggest change would be genuine wealth redistribution, particularly between like the global north and global south, eradication of debt, everything around wealth, genuine redistribution and equality in wealth. which would then create equality within power, which would then create equality within health outcomes. So for me, it's all about the money.
I always think with this, it's got to go hand in hand with just consuming less, because the West is so extreme, and the way that we're, always wanting more and buying more and creating more things that are ruining the planet. And
it's the root cause of so many things that you would kind of hope that with the redistribution of wealth, you would start to see people making different choices, people having better balance, people, just it drives so many inequalities in so many other areas that it feels like that's where it has to start.
I think the thing that strikes me as odd is that no matter how much people have, they want more. And I think that's about the fact that we're basically living in a culture that's based around fear, fearing not having enough, really. Thinking we're living in lack because we're encouraged to look around us and to always be wanting the next thing. Yeah. And so I wonder, what would it be like if we didn't live in fear and insecurity?
Such wisdom. What would it be like if we didn't live in fear and insecurity? What would that be like?
Wow. And the idea that we're living in lack, there's so much in there about, and the idea about, wealth distribution is so much of what we talk about really comes down to who has the power and who has the wealth. It really felt like it was, again, the group hadn't heard Kirstin's provocation, but it feels like it's still in conversation with it.
Yes, I think they're responding there to the question, what one change would you want to see? I mean, I just feel like that they've just filled my mind with images and ideas. And I don't think I've ever really thought of how different the world would be if that wasn't how we lived. If we did live in a world of abundance and security and the possibilities of that. Okay, well, let's move to our next item then. So for every Quines cast, we invite a playwright to create a short play inspired by our theme.
For change, our writer was Uma Nada-Rajah, and she is perfect for this because she writes in such a stunning satirical fashion. And I know that Caitlin really loves putting this together. The play is called Pudding, and it is performed by Nicole Cooper, Brian Ferguson, Linda McLaughlin, and Saskia Ashdown. And that'll be followed by another clip from our wonderful discussion group.
Luca has prepared a flu with a fillipoof poo faff fay and a reduction of foof. The fillipoof poo faff features a Dollarolo crisp alongside cubed fee high for Jojo in a bath of cocoa jus.
Interesting presentation.
Well, let's have a taste, shall we?
Now, let's have a sample of your Dollarolo crisp.
Please.
Am I detecting undertones of blow, blow, blow?
Yes, indeed. I'm glad you picked up on that.
Fascinating. How very...
Luca, tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind this plate.
Well, Elena, we've all had a pastry before, and the flu is, of course, a cornerstone of the classical repertoire. I wanted to take a bit of a risk. What I wanted to do was wrestle with the very notion of what a flu is. I wanted it to resonate with the contemporary palate.
Hence the blow, blow, blow.
Exactly. I wanted us to savour the clash of the elements, allow them to soften and coalesce at the back of the tongue.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Inshabi. The judges will now have a few minutes to deliberate, and we will return to announce which one of you will progress to the semi-final.
Contestants, you may now leave the room so judges may reach a decision in privacy.
Well, this is awful. This should be relatively straightforward.
I rather like it.
What?
I really rather like it.
Oh, come on, Elena.
I do.
Oh, always the contrarian.
I hate pastry round. Always so many bloody flus. Every pastry week, I brace myself to nod solemnly at plate after plate after plate of flus. Oh, here's an interesting twist. It's not, actually. But this one, even in its presentation, you said so yourself, Pauline.
Yeah, Pauline is here in body, but not in spirit.
Unlike you to miss our pre-show aperitif in the green room, Pauline. Where were you?
Sorry,
See, on this plate, there is a glimmer, the tiniest palpitation of something new, of currency, of vibrancy, of evolution. That Dolarolo crisp, that was bold. One is suddenly transported to a marketplace in Marseille where a violent altercation, a clash of the cultures melts into tantalising softness.
Yeah. I mean, I found her use of blow a bit cliche. A flu is a classic dish.
The undertones of blow stem from her heritage. They may be tokenistic to you, but to her...
Another bloody tick box exercise.
The blow was meticulously woven into every element on that plate.
Still, we cannot be sure of her intention.
She is the head patisserie chef at Le Petit Pamplemousse. It was flu reimagined.
Yeah, why must she reimagine? Who is she to reimagine so classic a dish?
Who better? She's taken the essence, the spirit of the flu, and distilled it through a palette of youth, heritage, and femininity.
She can come in here and lay insult to so classic a plate. The audacity, or shall I say, the absurdity of calling that a flu.
You're twitching.
Well, yes, I feel passionately about this. God, Elena, you push and you push and you push, and I understand this. You're the great Elena Castelli, a self-made success, no offence, Pauline, conferred with the greatest culinary honours at a time when this was unheard of for a woman. Perhaps you feel some responsibility to, I don't know, pay it forward. But to support this desecration.
The flu is an iconic dish. One plating of flu will not change that. But we must allow the flu to breathe.
This plate is not a breath. It's an apoplectic convulsion. Right, we are all in this room masters of the flu. Her great-great-grandfather, the great Philippe Perrault of the great family Perrault, built an empire upon its perfection. Now, shall we annihilate the classical repertoire in service of a box-ticking exercise? If the flawless execution of this iconic dish is no longer valued as the height of mastery of the craft, then who are we? What is sacred? Has the height of our potential become the unruly throwing together of random muck?
Marcus.
Oh, if there is no greatness but chaos in this strange new world...
Marcus!
What is it, Elena?
I just think you might be getting a bit emotional.
Emotional? Unbelievable.
We should be judging this dish for what it is and not what you feel it represents. For me, this dish holds. The proof is, quite literally, in the pudding.
I hate it.
Perhaps some of these notes are outside of your sphere of reference.
Outside of my sphere of reference? Well, may I remind you where your first job came from, Elena Castelli? Certainly not from outside my sphere of reference.
For me, she clearly goes through to the next round.
Absolutely not.
Pauline?
The judges have just 2 minutes to make their final decisions.
Pauline, please say something.
It would seem everyone is getting rather bothered about this dish.
Yeah, and what did you think of it, Pauline? What would the great Pierre Peru say?
Well, to be completely honest...
Oh, we know what Pauline thinks. It'll be the same as what we can presume her father thinks. The same as what her grandfather would have thought. What is likely to be identical to the opinion down the entire lineage of the head patisserie chiefs of the great famille Peru, right the way back to before pastry even existed, as Prometheus had not yet stolen fire from the gods. I could use another one of those aperitifs.
The reason I missed our pre-show aperitif in the green room, Elena, which, as you observed, is indeed unlike me, is that I was sitting aside my father's deathbed.
Oh.
The great Pierre Peru, head chef of the great famille Peru, has passed by a sudden and violent turn of bowel cancer. I only came here today out of habit.
So disrespectful, Elena. It is so utterly disrespectful. Pauline, I am so terribly sorry to hear this. Please accept my humble condolences. The great Pierre Peru was a legend. I'm shocked and I'm saddened.
I too am very sorry for your loss, Pauline. It is a great loss for us all.
I sat at his bedside as he passed. He asked if I would transcribe a letter. I'll read it here for us. Only as I believe that it may shed some light on our current predicament as it pertains to this particular take on flu, flu, flu.
Please.
My dearest Pauline, it would appear that my days are numbered. You, Pauline Peru, will now become the head chef of the great famille Peru. You are a quiet child, Pauline, reticent in nature, and I fear I may not have adequately prepared you for... I'm just going to skip that bit. Yes. The great famille Peru has become synonymous with tradition. Of this, we should be proud. Outside of this hospital window, the world is in shambles. Perhaps there is no greater time for a firm consensus on what defines a flu, flu, flu and what does not.
Exactly.
But perhaps, he said, and then, to be quite honest, he began to lose his train of thought. He began to quote the great poet Rumi. For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides that may rise and expand and seek unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance. It is in this spirit, Pierre Peru said, with regards to the flu, 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 I believe that the only way forward is...
It is?
At this point, my father began to writhe in pain. The nurse attended to him and administered a dosage of morphine. Pierre Peru fell into a deep sleep from which he would never awaken.
Contestants, you may now re-enter the studio. The judges have reached their final decision.
I think that I wonder about if it's about being able to tolerate those losses. Do you know, because if you're looking for, if we want to live in a more equal society, that means some people are going to have to lose something, and people need to be able to tolerate that and embrace that as well.
It is linked to empathy. It is linked to what we owe each other and so, you know what, I don't know if you've ever felt this, but I often find myself just willing emotional literacy and emotional competence from other people, right? That assumes that I have this. I've decided that I have this. I'm growing into it. I'm trying to have it. But I do find myself having conversations with people, even if it is a political conversation, whatever it might be, But the ability to be able to express your emotions, the ability to be able to communicate, the ability to be able to see something from somebody else's perspective, where one person may be telling you that you are privileged and you understanding what that means and allowing that space for that conversation, not the defensive, but I don't have this and you don't have that. You know, that emotional literacy is a thing that I think a change that we should all be encouraged to pursue and then facilitated to pursue, because whether it's our politics, whether it's our communities, we are becoming more insular as a nation. You know, we're becoming more insular within our individuals and our communities, whether it's social media. Empathy, honesty would create more real conversations, real pictures on Instagram, whatever it would. So if there's a change, I guess what I'd like to see is emotional communication and literacy.
Yeah, great to see both our play and the discussion group on the same level there, and thinking about change and how we find empathy with each other. That's what we're saying at the beginning, isn't it? That change in your own life can feel really disorientating. And so even as we're asking for change from other people and from the people around us, we need to remain sympathetic and empathetic about the fact that people are having to lose something in order to bring about something new.
What was really interesting about those two pieces, which I think resonates with the way Kirstin opened that provocation about whose story and whose story is getting told, whose story makes the headlines, was about the need for, if we want change as a society, we have to be able to, as Lisa put it, bear the losses. And it made me think what one of my favourite lines from the play is about, why does she have to reimagine? And it's like, well, actually, if you want to create space for people to reimagine the future and for them to bring their stories, we also have to be prepared to accept the loss of our own privilege and power and voice. You know, you have to make room for change. And I think that play was so beautiful in articulating that. And I think that it felt like the discussion group, Lisa just immediately picked up on it. Feels like this is the moment to introduce our next guest. I have long admired Louise Welsh's writing, and actually a lot of her advocacy and her work at Glasgow University. And she's just a real good egg, a really lovely, lovely human being. Yeah, let's listen to Louise Welsh.
Hello, everybody. One day, a change is going to come. You better change your attitude. Be the change you want to see. Don't ever change. Don't just change. Transform. Changes. It's really hard to talk about change without slipping into cliche and false profundity. Even what you want comes from the heart. When what you want comes from the heart. I crave change. Warm rooms, an end to homelessness, obliteration of prejudice, establishment of universal basic income, investment in the NHS, free education, nationalised care homes, railways, energy companies, an end to capitalism. Change. We're born not perfect, but hopefully perfect seeming to our parents. The years build, the way a surgeon counts spinal vertebrae. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Change is to be fought for. It is to be resisted. This has been a week of pomp and ceremony, of talk of change and constancy. Ancient rituals have been dusted off, uniforms let out at the waist, gold braid polished, medals pinned on chest. The Queen is dead. Long live the monarchy. This has been a quick change any drag queen would be proud of. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Watching the royal progress from Balmoral to the top of the Royal Mile, it's been interesting to observe how protocols and references to history are used to pin the status quo, stifle change, preserve the power elite, not my king. Change. Replace something with something else, especially something of the same kind that is newer or better. Substitute one thing for another. Edinburgh used to be known as a city of body snatchers, But things have changed since then, so why so many soldiers? The royal children, 3 of them dressed in uniforms, 1 in civvies, we all know why, guarded their mother's coffin as it sat in state a few miles up the road from where we are now in St Giles. Each of them stood at one side of the coffin, and they in turn were flanked by soldiers. And as if that's not fairy story enough, the children were all ancient. Wrinkled wains, representing the army, the navy, the Royal Air Force, and the magical powers of a multi-million-pound settlement. The not-so-subtle message is, nothing has changed, peasants. I've been doing a lot of driving up and down the motorway to visit my dad, who's in hospital. I'm sick of my CDs, sick of the radio, sick of the same road, repeating and repeating, sick of myself for belching out petrol. I need a change. I should grow myself some wings and fly. Scrolling through the airwaves, I hear the same phrase repeated on different stations. We are living through history. I tell the radio, we are always living through history. The DJ isn't my friend. They don't answer back. George Orwell said, the most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. Onwards to victory, victory, a history of the English-speaking peoples, the unrelenting struggle. Winston Churchill wrote 72 volumes of history books and speeches. How many will Boris Johnson write? Some things change, some things never change. Women's hemlines rise and fall with the economy. Have you noticed the return of the maxi dress? It's confirmation the recession's here, girls. Watch out for heels getting higher. When times are hard, it gets harder to run away. We cannot change the past, but we can change our underwear. We cannot change the past, but history, her story, can change. If we pick up our pens and tell it ourselves, start that podcast. Be the witches of Scotland. They're fighting for a pardon that is long overdue, and in the process, reminding us the fight is not over. 3 women every week murdered by men in the UK? We need a change. Do I want a revolution? Yes. Can I have one that is not preceded by chaos, please? In London, a woman holds up a sign, "Not my king. Police arrest her." In Edinburgh, a young man shouts that one of the Queen's sons is a paedophile. Some men in the crowd start to manhandle him. Police arrest him. At the proclamation, a woman holds up a sign, "Abolish the monarchy." Police arrest her. There has been a change. In Aberdeenshire, tractors line the verges in tribute. In Edinburgh, thousands of people cram behind barriers in the high street. In London, flowers pile high outside the palace. There's a craze for marmalade sandwiches. People on the internet get antsy and ask why the sandwiches are not being dropped off at food banks. There is no change. I need a change. Opposite my block of flats, a hawthorn tree is dying. It's 120 years old and rotting from the inside. In a couple of weeks, a tree surgeon will take it down section by section, and then when it's done, he'll plant a new one. Change. I'm less than half the age of the hawthorn tree, but I have learned there is no meaning to life. No God to anoint a man as king, no matrix or system that holds the world in place. All that matters is life. No one individual or species above another. The years climb and decline, the way they did for our ancestors. There are changes to be fought for, changes to be resisted. Do you want a change? I think we need a change. We need a change. Thank you.
I would like to see these national barriers, even inside this country, broken down. Yeah, I think that if we would tell stories which connect us, tell stories in which we take responsibility, not just for the people who are right next to us, but for people who are halfway across the world. Yeah, if we saw ourselves as joint guardians of this enormous, beautiful natural environment, then I think that would be a story I would like to be able to tell about myself.
This collective guardianship thing is it's such a utopian image to think of all of us being able to together stand and take care of our communities, of our planet together. And it's just something that seems really impossible due to people telling themselves that they're not the person to take agency over any situation. Being a bystander is such a huge part of how we're built as humans. It's just stand at the side. If something's happening, you're not the person standing in that, especially as a woman, especially as a person of colour, especially as any marginalised. You're not really able, if you're not an old white man, you don't have the power, so you can't actually support or help in any of these spaces.
And we almost need to get to a point where we're all the person to do that. Everybody has that agency and is the person. Because you're a campaigner. I don't know what made you make that leap into. Did it just feel like you had to do it because other people weren't? Or
do you know, I've sometimes been asked this quite a lot. When why did you start the work that you do? And I once asked my dad this, right? And I said, Dad, have I always been political? And he said to me, I don't know if you've always been political, but you've always been angry. And I was a bit thank you. I'm not really sure what to do with that. The reason I think I did it was because I had the fortune of being around people who were also interested in that, and we created a small collective of our own, right? Mm-hmm. And it's why collectivism and movements are so important, because if we're all just individuals, not really talking to each other, but feeling the same thing, then we're just burdened with the feeling and isolated. Whereas when I found other people who cared about, at the time, I remember it was mainly about education rights and access to education. And I found there's other people that have actually been thinking about these things. But the reality is that once you found a few of those people, you have that connection, you create that group, suddenly you're given permission to have emotions, have anger, have empathy, and then find out what you can do together to change it.
I was just thinking when Louise was talking about how that thing that she said about wanting the revolution but not wanting the chaos. That really struck me.
Absolutely. And that is exactly what we're saying earlier about when we live in a culture of fear and insecurity. That's what keeps us quiet, is that we want the change, but we're not prepared. We're not resilient for the upheaval that would cause. And, nothing like the death of a monarch to let you remember the hierarchy that we live within in this country, right? It was very confronting, all of that stuff. And I remember really feeling at the time that dissent wasn't allowed. It was quashed so quickly that there wasn't that opportunity to speak up against the system. And it felt really surreal that kind of freedom of the press, the freedom of the debate that we enjoy the rest of our lives was just not possible in that week. And I found that quite scary.
It was also just that self-censorship, I think a lot of people self-censored. And I remember that night when, Kirstin and Louise spoke and they both kind of referenced the Queen dying. And I remember feeling anxious about it because we'd got so used to these thoughts being kind of private thoughts, and that that we sensed that there was a real risk to say anything.
I agree with you. During that time, we didn't really talk about it. And I felt really grateful for those collectives. Just as Talit is saying there, being able to find a collective where you can find a place to agree, a place to imagine. And during those times I was going into work and being around those like-minded people, that felt really, really nourishing and really important and really vital. I think I might have lost myself a little bit in that time if I hadn't had that.
And actually, that's where you found your power and your strength, is in community. But actually, I think that one of the things that I think I've really learned, or really kind of forced to reflect upon through this episode, that actually, if we want change, we also have to be prepared to pay the cost of it. Whether that's chaos, whether that's giving up our space, giving up our privilege, whether that is about fighting for all of our stories to be told. It is about being prepared to pay the cost of it. And I think that when Lisa spoke in that last discussion group about what we need to do is all realise we can be agents of change, I felt that was a real call to arms. And I think that we often feel like we are in that state of paralysis on our stairs, looking at our phones going, how can I possibly do anything? And actually, we can't change everything, but we can all change something, or at least we can keep moving towards change. But it is about being prepared to pay that cost, even if that means that we have to be prepared to have the difficult conversations. What a lot of learning that we've had.
Yeah, but like, what is that? Are we preparing for change? And if we are preparing for change, then I'm holding on to the people around me. I'm holding on to those people in my circle, the people who feel similarly. I think that's what we got to do, right? We've got to hold on to each other and get ready for it, because it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
So maybe with that in mind, we should talk about what's happening in January.
Yes, that's right. So before we welcome back Hailey Beavis with some more music, we wanted to tell you about our upcoming bonus episode in January.
So we're going to bring together some of the guests from across the series, from all the episodes, for a roundtable discussion, and we'll really dig into some of the themes and ideas that we've explored across the series.
And we would love to have some questions from you to put to the panel. So if there's anything that you would like to respond to, maybe something that really resonated with your experience, or something that we haven't mentioned that you wanted to be talked about under one of these themes, then please get in touch.
Yeah, you can send us a question or a response, a statement maybe about how you found the episodes, via all the Stellar Quines social media channels. So we're on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, or you can pop us an email via hello@stellarquines.co.uk.
Wonderful. We really encourage you to connect with us, and so that we can talk about this and we can bring out your questions and your responses to our discussion group in January. So finally, we want to welcome back the just extraordinary Hailey Beavis to close out our show, and to also make sure that you know, if you don't know already, that Hailey has a new album out called I'll Put You Where the Trombone Slides, and I would really recommend you to get hold of that.
And I felt proud in the garden. I was all in. Why should I be beat back and ruined when the dead trees are unburied and whispering still? If there's a place you can't get to, girl, it's all in your head. You know I would love to protect you. Girl, those words I just said, I mean. Ooh, yeah. I doubt the wild hills are in hiding. Why should I be beat back and ruined when the dead trees are unburied and whispering still? You know I would love to protect you. Girl, those words I just said. You know I would love to protect you. Girl, those words I just said. You know I would love to protect you, yeah. Just said I mean. Love to protect you, yeah. Girl, those words I just said I mean. You know I would love to protect you, yeah. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you, yeah. You know those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you, yeah. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you, yeah. You know those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you. Don't even know. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love you. You don't know. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you. Don't even know. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you. Don't even know. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you. Don't even know. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you. Don't even know. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you. Don't even know. Girl, those words I just said I would. You know I would love to protect you. Don't even know. Girl, those words I just said.
What a wonderful way to end this episode with the incredible Hailey Beavis. And do check out her new album, I'll Put You Where the Trombone Slides. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed our show. And if you did, please tell your pals.
We're on all your podcast platforms, and you can rate and review the show, and that just really helps us to make more, and it also helps people to find the show. Our 4th episode will be out next week, and the theme is success.
And our guests will include the rap group The Honey Farm, writer and editor Larissa Qureshi, activist and writer Sarah Sheridan, and it will also feature a short play by playwright Isla Karen. I hope you can enjoy us then.
This episode of Quines Cast is curated and presented by Hannah Lavery and Caitlin Skinner, featuring original work by our contributors Hailey Beavis, Kirstin Innes, Louise Welsh and Uma Nada-Rajah.
Editor Helena Rafai, project producer Barbara Lyon, sound engineer Graham Godley.
Performers in Pudding by Uma Nada-Rajah were Nicole Cooper, Brian Ferguson, Linda McLaughlin and Saskia Ashdown.
Quines Cast image by Julia Francis Dugan. Quines Cast is possible because of funding from Creative Scotland and support from our partners, the Travis Theatre, Edinburgh International Book Festival and Jupiter Rising.
The Stellar Quines team are General Manager Barbie Lyon, Associate Director of Engagement Beth Godfrey, Artistic Director and CEO Caitlin Skinner, Company Administrator and Young Quines producer Erin McGee, Head of Audiences and Communications Sarah Marie Mooney.
If you want to keep up to date with all things Quines, please visit our website and sign up for the newsletter.
We are Stellar Quines because of the many people who have supported us over the years. Next year will see us reach our 13th year of asking for better representation and equality, and we still have a long way to go. We need your financial support and sponsorship to help us keep that work going. Please get in touch via stellarquines.co.uk if you can help support our future.